Welcome to the Dirty Verdict Podcast, where your hosts, trial lawyers Kyle Herbert and Bill Ogden, and mediator Peter Taff, talk with interesting lawyers and break down recent legal news in detail. Here's Kyle, Bill, and Peter.
Chaz Klaes, welcome to the Dirty Verdict.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Chaz, let me say before these guys
Tear into you like a pack of jackals.
we've done, I think we're close to 40 episodes so far, and we've had a commercial litigator, but it's not can't say plaintiff defense. You're the first more traditional defense, personal injury defense, wrongful death, big time case defense lawyer that we've had on here. And so I really appreciate you coming on to give a little balance.
That's what
Otherwise, I'm having to provide a lot of the balance. And so I'm glad for the help.
Hey, I appreciate that. I keep telling Kyle we got to balance this out. I watch you guys. I keep saying, man, you got to stop having plaintiffs. It's getting a little one sided over there. So
yeah, I said the same thing. Really happy that you're here.
Chaz, we have a request just to speak up just a little bit louder from our tech engineer.
I'll move it a little closer then too.
Fantastic. So Chaz, where are you from?
Houston, born and raised. Went to Virginia, Washington and Lee for college and law school. Played lacrosse in college for a couple of years and realized,
Like Jim Brown.
kind of like Jim Brown, but a little bit different. Realized I did not have a NFL career to potentially fall back on, and needed something else to do. And
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Washington and Lee for both.
How is Washington and Lee's football team? Because we already went through this with Rebecca, and they are doing great at Texas State.
So I'm fairly certain we may be one of the only schools that still does not cut anyone. And my high school team from Houston could mop the floor with them. So it was not, but hey, we did win the conference championship, I think 3 out of the 4 years I was there. So that was, that shows you the talent that we're dealing with.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I did not play.
What part of town did you grow up in?
I grew up in River Oaks.
So you finish up at Washington and Lee. What made you? Did you go straight to law school or did you hang out?
Yeah, no, I went straight to law school for college. I got real sick my freshman year, had the flu for like 2 weeks. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I watched Law and Order all day on TV for like 2 straight weeks. Decided I'm going to go be a prosecutor. That was what I went to law school for.
It's not too late. Rebecca could probably get you a job.
It's not too late, but then I was like, the pay was a little bit different, and I decided to follow the civil money and do the civil stuff instead. But very admirable to any of the prosecutors. I have a lot of friends from law school who went into prosecution. So great career path for some.
Where'd you go to law school?
Washington and Lee also.
Oh,
So I did both. I did both college and law school there.
it's just one trip to IKEA, and then 8 years later, you throw it all out.
Well,
no, not 8.
Only 7 for
7 years later.
Maybe you were 8, but I.
How many hands do you have, buddy?
Yeah. So I loved it. I knew I wanted to be in Houston. My family's all from Houston, and there was so much to do, be outside, and I loved it. And they had a cool program when I was in law school. They got away from exam-based school to like practical-based school. So, I mean, you had to try a case as a 3L to graduate. You had a lot of your classes had more practical components to it. So I was really excited to be a part of one of the first classes that did that. And it was really neat. So, I mean, I tried 2 cases to federal judges when I was a 3L.
Wow.
Yeah. So in my 3rd year, I think I took 4 or 5 depositions, argued multiple hearings in state and federal court. It was
like real hearings.
yeah, like real
You
cases.
just have like a sponsoring attorney.
Yeah, so we had like some local attorneys that would sponsor the clinics, and
that's cool.
we would argue. The one I did was black lung benefits, so coal miners' families, and
You were like, these guys are fine. They've never been hurt.
no, I was on your side for those.
If that inspired, and you took that, which inspired you to do what you do now.
Exactly. Deny.
So, any particular reason that you decided to go to law school? Do you have lawyers in the family?
No, so it's one of those things. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My family's all been in business forever, various business interests and things. And I thought, I want to go do something different. I want to chart my own path for a while. And like I said, I wanted to be a prosecutor. And I went to law school. That was freshman year of college, and I told everybody up till law school, hey, I'm going to be a prosecutor. And then I actually I really like torts. I really like contracts, and criminal law was just actually didn't really pique my interest anymore once I got to law school.
Do most of the people at Washington and Lee end up practicing in Virginia, or is it like one of those schools where like people just like go back to wherever?
So it's mostly either New York, a lot of like Wall Street, corporate, securities, transactional guys. I joke with some bunch of my law school buddies. They're like, oh, I thought about where to put a comma in a document today. I'm like, oh, well, I thought about burned and dead people today. So we have different lives. Or either Virginia, or we put probably a third of my class went to go work on the Hill.
Sure.
Yeah, so those were kind of the three main streams. And then we had some others like California and Texas and whatnot. But, you're either really going to New York City or Washington.
Did you have any interest in doing something other than coming back to Houston?
No, I love Texas too much. I mean, it was great to be away. It was cool to be there from 18 to 25, but I was ready to come back home after.
Where is Washington and Lee?
It's in the dead center of Virginia. If you were to throw a dart at it and hit it, it's in Lexington, Virginia.
Okay.
So it's right next door to VMI. And I mean, it's super historical, really cool campus, beautiful area. You can get up and hike, fish, canoe, hunt, on any given day, pretty much 12 months out of the year.
Well, that's why Bill lives on Buffalo Bayou.
Yeah.
I'm a wilderman.
Hey, but I was just glad to be back now.
So you come back to Houston. What's your first job?
My first job was working for a guy named Don Hudgens doing insurance defense work. I knew from the get-go that I wanted to try cases, wanted to be in litigation, but not big firm paper pushing litigation. I really wanted to be in the courtroom, and so I started with Don, got a couple years of experience there. Then I moved to a bigger-ish firm, a firm with 12 offices around the country, and reaffirmed that was not me.
Are you allowed to say the name of that firm, or are you sworn to silence?
Pass.
That's fine. I've got two of those in my resume. Yeah. They're just a solid pass.
Yeah, just a solid pass. Still have some friends there, but it was good to move on, and ended up working for Donato since 2015, and then we became partners a couple years back, and I love it. And, it's great because we do predominantly defense work, but we also do a little subrogation work. Mm-hmm. So it's fun to occasionally get to be the plaintiff, and even though it's for the insurance company and it's just for money, so it's only liability fights because there's no real damages issues, but it's fun to get to do both. I think it makes you a better lawyer to defend cases knowing how to prosecute them, or vice versa. So last year I tried a subrogation case and got a great verdict and enjoyed it. So it's fun to do both.
You might not remember me, but I was against you my second case ever.
Oh, cool.
And so when
Did you win?
I was like, yeah, I did. You paid me.
Okay, good.
Did you use it Legends or no?
It had to have been. It was 2013.
So it would have been
14.
So it would have been Hudgens probably.
And the case had been sat on somebody's desk. Nobody did anything. I ordered records and sent a Stowers letter, first time for both. And like the next day I got a call and they were like, hey, we'll give you the policy. And so I remember I walked through the West Falls office.
This is so easy.
I was like, hey, this Ramirez case, I think I got it settled. And he was like, for how much? It was like $1 million. And he was like, what line is they on? What line? Is that all you got? All right, good. And I was like, he was like, nice work. And I was like, I this is the easiest job in the world. I'm going to be a billionaire before I retire, but I'm 10.
Yeah.
No, it was, so, I mean, I've had some great experience, had great bosses and mentors coming up. And on the defense side, everybody says the best places to learn how to try cases are either prosecutor's office or the insurance defense shops. And I 100% agree with that. So
what kind of stuff do you handle now?
So now it's mostly, catastrophic personal injury, deaths, burns, maims, amputations, quadriplegics. Our firm, we handle all of them from soft tissue car wrecks all the way up. But me, I've kind of graduated up to the big boy cases, I would say, the catastrophic.
Is it all MVA, motor vehicle accidents? Or?
No. We run the spectrum of I've had a bat contamination that caused severe respiratory illnesses to MVAs I kind of trend more to MVAs. I have a lot of clients that are in the trucking industry, so I do a lot of MVA work, but it's anything and everything across the board. And I think that's what kind of sets our firm apart from some of our competitors is we aren't niche. We're not just trucking defense guys. We're not just oil field defense guys. We're not just premises defense guys. We kind of run the spectrum, and we have really good resources for any different kind of facet of that.
So from y'all's perspective on the defense side, were you a proponent or opponent of the business court swallowing up the trucking litigation? Because the goal was to have, any, trucking case fall into this business course that they did, and that in committee it died out and we didn't get it. But I was curious from the defense perspective, did y'all want that or no?
From our perspective, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of the whole firm, right? And our clients,
But that's what we want you to do right now.
Yeah, exactly, right? From my perspective, the case, it's not like the cases were going to go away. So, in my opinion, the longer a case lingers, the worse off it gets for both sides, right? Witnesses move, things happen, it's harder. I think you should push. So anything you can do to push the cases, I teach my young lawyers, hey, let's be aggressive. Let's not just wait for the plaintiff to do stuff. Let's not wait for, just be reactive. Let's actually be proactive to move it, because that's when we can develop stuff. Get out of your office, go get witness statements, get out of your office, go interview people, go take depositions affirmatively. But, there's been so many proposed changes, but, I didn't follow that part of it that closely, but I think it's all going to be the status quo for now.
What's your favorite part about your job?
Hanging out with people like you, Kyle.
Talking to me every 3 days?
Yeah, exactly. Responding when you're harassing my associates for depot dates. No, what I love about my job is every day is something different, right? Like today, I was fighting about a oil spill in New Orleans, where it was a bad weld on an oil storage tank that caused leakage into the surrounding areas by the port. Right. Tomorrow, I'm dealing with a trucking accident out in Mexico from a Mexican trucking company, an accident here. Later on in the week, I may be dealing with a oil and gas drilling incident. So every day is something different. Every day is something new. I get to learn. You kind of get to dig into a little bit of your subject matter. It's not just a car wreck docket. You get to learn some really cool stuff. Like I learned more about bats and mammals and contamination over the course of a year and a half that I never knew I would, thought I would, or ever wanted to,
Guano's been a serious issue, especially on our show.
What?
Bat guano.
No, I know what you... Okay.
Landlord says the bass end.
On a legal note, so I know the Mexican trucking company, when NAFTA was still in place, they could, without getting a commercial CDL here, they could operate their trucks as long as straight in, straight out. With the new Canada, U.S., Mexico treaty, can they still do that? And whose DOT do they fly under when they're here?
So technically when they're here, technically they can get a CDL in Mexico because they have an equivalent in Mexico, right?
Do they?
No, I defend a lot of Mexican trucking companies from Mexico. I'll tell you, they're the best clients.
Who's the carrier on those?
Pass. But
we'll get them. Get them a cocktail.
In terms of while they're here, they're under DOT. They still have to comply with the DOT regulations or the equivalent while they're here, right? In the sense of there's not necessarily, they don't call it a DQ file. Like we call it a DQ file here, right? Driver qualification file. In Mexico, they call it something else, but they
call it LDQ file.
But is the coverage, is it a Mexican insurance coverage, or is it an American coverage once they come over?
It's American coverage once they're over. So they have their coverage in Mexico, and they have coverage while they're in the U.S. It's a cross-border policy.
Okay, and I ask only because the statutory employment provision is now nothing, and doesn't, even though it's crystal clear to me, there's guys on the other side that have changed it to where it doesn't mean anything. And so I remember reading that provision for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is easy. And they were like, yeah, that actually doesn't work. I was like, dang it. So I was curious with the new treaty, how the Mexican carriers, or how the Mexican transporters fall once they cross the border. So cleared it up.
Yeah, and they're inspected multiple times a day. I've got some of them that come across 4 or 5 times a day, and each time they come across, they're inspected. And so, they're following all the regulations. They're subject to all the regulations when they're on this side of the border.
So what's your least favorite thing about your job?
Yeah, keeping time. I mean, I feel like there's certain aspects of keeping time that are just, you lose kind of the humanity of it. And there's more of like, okay, I got to make sure that I go get pre-approval for this, right? Or there's somebody on my team, hey, this is a really big deposition. And, oh, I forgot. I'm bringing in an associate because there's so many documents, whatnot. Oh, shoot. Gotta stop and go say, hey, we need pre-approval for that. But just keeping time, we're so busy in the day, and then I try to do mine every day, just at the end of the day, go home and keep it on my machine. But, sometimes I forget. I've got 2 small kiddos. I got to go to gymnastics, baseball, whatever it may be.
There's a lot of minutia.
Yeah.
It sucks up a bunch of your well-trained brain.
Yeah.
To stuff that's kind of... I was a defense lawyer for a few years. I remember I spent one Sunday afternoon about 4 hours explaining to a guy the difference between the Texas Outer Continental Shelf Indemnity Act versus the Louisiana Offshore Anti-Indemnity Act, and how the two interplayed based on like contracts that were in 4 different languages. And the guy on the other side of the phone, I would be shocked if he graduated high school, but he was an adjuster, and it made me want to jump off the top of a building.
And Rebecca's going, good choice on being a criminal.
Yeah.
Well, now she's about to have to hear stuff.
I'm just glad Kyle's a super nerd and knows all those terms.
I don't even know what a ligature mark is.
You
But-
do now.
I do now. Thank you, Rebecca.
Once you get to this top and kind of higher level of catastrophic cases, does your word carry a lot more weight? Do they give you authority to settle, or do you always have to go back to that non-lawyer carrier and ask permission, each and every time a number gets thrown your way?
So I see it as like a team aspect. So it kind of depends on who you're working with. At the higher level stuff, you're often dealing with lawyers on our side as well. And so, my job is to be, litigate the case, be a facilitator of information, right? And some clients say, you know what, let's go and see what you can do, keep me in the loop. Other times you got to be stair step. But the nice thing about handling the bigger in cases is, you can kind of cut through some of the stuff. I'll have claims handlers say, hey, you know what, I'm flying to Houston. Let's take Kyle to lunch and let's try to just sit down and, knock it out, or vice versa. It makes it, when you deal with the higher end claims, you kind of cut out.
They want to cut to the chase.
Yeah, and you're not
sometimes.
dealing with like the, personal limits types of cases where you're just plugging stuff into a calculator. There's more of a human aspect to it, and there's more of a, sitting across the table, let's talk real. And that's kind of my philosophy. I hate mediation, no offense, Pete. I think it,
You get offended. We do it all the time.
I just think that it, you should be able to sit down and just talk and knock it out.
I hate to mediate, but if I do mediate,
Go to Pete.
it's always with Peter.
You sound a lot like Tommy Fibbage right now. He was here like a month ago, and he said the exact same thing. Like, I miss those days where we go to lunch and settle a case. You either settled it or you just said, all right, we're going to trial. There wasn't this game of back and forth and penny pinching like we do now, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Well, now there's kind of a mindset too, in my opinion, of people are like, oh, well, this is just the first mediation, and so there's first, second, even some people are like, oh, well, we don't really make any real deals until you get to the third mediation.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get there without having to go through the other steps. So
When I was just getting started with this firm, maybe 3 or 4 years in, I had what I thought was a really good case. And I went and complained to one of my mentors, who's a PI lawyer named Mark Murray. And I said, look, we went to mediate this case, and I thought the case was worth X, and they weren't even within a mile of it. And he said, Kyle, like, there's at least 2 more mediations in these guys. Like, they're just getting started at yanking your chain, which is, it's kind of crazy, but that's just kind of the world we live in.
So if a plaintiff's attorney comes in hot and it's like, hey, look, I know it's a good case. Liability is great. I'm going to do my best to let you bill the shit out of this file. And then at the end, let's be reasonable and you pay me. Is that deals that you cut, or do you not? Can you not say that on camera?
No, he is not definitely
Blink,
a deal.
blink twice. Yep, he did.
Pass.
He did. Y'all saw it. He saw it. He did.
pass. I will say though, oh, sorry, Peter.
I was going to say, I seen that. As a plaintiff's lawyer, you always had that suspicion that maybe that was happening.
Still do.
No, but
It depends on the case.
It's definitely, I don't see that. I don't feel that as a mediator now. And I particularly don't feel that with firms like Chaz's firm that have so much business that they don't need to do that to keep it. They need to turn files around. That's what they need to do. And so, I was surprised by that being on the mediation side. I really don't see that phenomenon.
How many cases, how big is your docket at any given time?
So, well, I mean, that's kind of a double-edged question because there's cases that I originate that I have other lawyers in the firm work on, and then there's cases that I, am actually involved in the day-to-day and not just kind of the client facilitator. But I mean, of these big ones, there's probably anywhere from 30 to 50 at any given point that I am hands-on day-to-day. I'm the guy taking the depositions. I'm showing up to everything. There's other ones that come in, okay, if the client needs me to show up, I'm going to show up, but otherwise I'm going to let some other lawyer run with it kind of under my supervision. And that, I couldn't give you a number on that, but...
So, Chaz, before we got started, we talked a little bit about some of our personal connections and how I've worked with and had cases against a bunch of lawyers at your firm. When you guys roundtable my cases, do you guys think to yourselves, and especially the higher-ups, do they say, Kyle Herbert, great litigator, greatest litigator? What's the feel over there?
It's across the board. It's Kyle Herbert who.
Fair. That's totally fair.
They just say hey, let's pay quick so he doesn't blow us up on the podcast.
That's, I actually have that mostly get along with the lawyers at your firm, so that's good. Do you think you want to keep doing this forever? Be long-term partner defense? Because I know a lot of defense lawyers who have a really angry little plaintiff's lawyer inside who's just aching to get out.
So I'm super happy where I am right now.
No doubt about that.
I've got great partners. We have a great book. Like I said, we get to do the plaintiff side too. So I can keep that little man suppressed. And, the nice thing about the plaintiff's work that we do is there's no, client that's emotionally attached to anything, right? Sure. It's typically property damage, business interruption damage, those types of issues where it's just moving money from one side to the other. So we get to do the cool stuff with the plaintiff side, get to be super aggressive, get to push the cases, but don't have to deal with crying moms, crying widows, people who say they can't work anymore. Not there's anything wrong with that.
No, it's
you get to do both sides.
It's a difficult part of the job. Well, let me ask you this same question we asked Rebecca. Any particular cases that were noteworthy or particularly proud of or particularly weird that you think are worth chatting about?
Yeah, so I defended a class action bat contamination case.
Yeah, you talked
that came out in January. It was filed January 29th of 2020. Oh, wow. At the same time that there was a bat disease going around, and there was I was getting calls from the media every day. Plaintiffs were going crazy thinking that
Now, bats, we're talking about the flying rodents.
Yes, and originally they all thought COVID was originated from bats, so it was January of 2020, get this suit, plus all the COVID hysteria and so forth, and that case was a lot of fun. So
what was the allegation? Bats were contaminating tanks by...
No, bats were contaminating people's air conditioner vents, coming in through their dryer vents, and then...
Where?
At an apartment complex here in Houston.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when they leave from under the bridge, they would all go hang out at that apartment complex.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that one was interesting. I learned a lot about class action defense on that.
So how is somebody liable for bats?
Well, so what the allegations were that you created conditions where a bat would come in, live on the property, which would then cause guano, which guano, certain types of guano can be hazardous to.
Yeah. It dries out. It turns to dust. It's really bad for you.
How do you know?
Bill, I know everything. I know everything.
Yeah, of course he knows.
But that's right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I've tried quite a bit of commercial MVAs that are all a little different, all a little strange. Everyone's fun. I spend a lot of time trying cases in federal court and a lot of time trying cases in federal court against lawyers who don't spend a lot of time in federal court. Plaintiffs' lawyers don't want to be in federal court. Federal court judges hate plaintiffs.
I love federal
personal
court.
injury cases.
I get a date and we're going.
Yeah, exactly.
I love federal court.
I like federal court because we brief a lot of in their bigger cases, and when you're in federal court, the judges have briefing attorneys and staff attorneys, and everything's read and understood, and they come with real questions, and everybody abides by the time limits pretty closely.
If the judge says you have 10 minutes, you have 10 minutes. I mean, you may only have 8 minutes by the time they shut you off. But
who is your least favorite plaintiff's attorney?
he's sitting next to me.
That's fair. That was a softball. What plaintiff's attorney do you have, not in this room, obviously, that you have the most respect for?
You don't have to say most, just maybe some.
Yeah, so or there's some that stand out. That you're like, they were good, and I respect the way that they conducted themselves, and they did a good job.
Yeah, so there's a guy out of Austin, Marble Falls, Graham Sutliff. We had a really contentious death case we tried last April in Barnett County, and stand-up guy, hard fought. There's actually 4 plaintiffs' firms, had various of the plaintiffs. It was he, Chris Johns, Dax Garza, and Scott Sains. Those guys were all stand-up. I mean, they were great to deal with. I mean, super professional. Would go to war with them anytime. They were great.
So Graham and Hank used to sublease from me.
Okay.
So that's pretty wild.
Yeah, no. Those were good. So I had a case I helped Donato with a couple years back against Tommy Fivich and Jarrett and
Elsie.
Elsie, and then Richard Inaho. So they all had part of the plaintiff and stand-up guys. Tommy was great, although you put Tommy and Donato in a room together, and it's like 45 minutes of war stories, and then you're like, okay, can we get back to what we're here to talk about? But
you can't even understand them because their draws just get worse and are more severe. And it's like, what language are you to?
Exactly. And then I tried one last year in April of 2022 against Scott Cowan out of San Antonio in Laredo. He's a trucking guy, and he was Michael Cowan. Michael Cowan.
He has a shitty.
He has the worst podcast anybody's ever.
Yeah, we're the only legal podcast.
Hey, his podcast is a moon cast shadow in comparison.
I've been on it before. I don't remember. I was drugged.
So I say, I got to get this.
We had a hard fought case in Laredo federal court. We tried last year, and he was great to work with. I mean, look, the way I see it is this job is hard enough as it is, right? With deadlines and client expectations, just managing your caseload. It really sucks when you have somebody on the other side that is difficult to work with, and not difficult.
You hear that, Bill?
Yeah, I started that way. I've Mark Lapidus, helped me. He humbled me a lot on one case like 7 years ago, and I've never been the same since. So I don't start wars every chance I get, but I do enjoy one still. Oh, nobody will say I'm great to work with, but they will say I'll settle a case.
Well, and I mean, I think there's a difference between just starting a war to start a war versus, knocking heads in a depot, knocking heads in a courtroom, either in trial or a hearing, but then, going outside and saying, hey, let's go grab a burger and a beer, right? And, being cool. But I feel like there's a lot of people now that, outside of the case, while the case is going on, whether it be in court, depot, or just emails, everybody's just contentious, and there's no civility between the two, and that's what makes it really difficult to deal with.
I mean, mostly I just send you pictures of my middle finger via email, which we understand each other perfectly.
Yeah, or text message. It's about one of these.
That's true. We do text a fair amount.
Well, along those lines, Chaz, what would you advise someone who's a plaintiff's lawyer, not necessarily against you, but just in general? Like, what can they do to help? Because ultimately they want a recovery for their client of some kind.
Right.
So what can they do to most effectively help you do your job to assess the claim and make recommendations?
So, I mean, do your homework on the front end, right? I mean, everybody's, in my opinion, plaintiffs' lawyers are like, let's get help me get the case settled, right? And help me get the case evaluated. Get your medical records together up front. I mean, there's been a rush lately, I feel like, of people filing suit, 2 days after an accident, a day after an accident. There's not been any real time to develop stuff. Do your homework, be responsive. We deal with that issue a lot. People just going, radio silent. So I get that we're all busy, but, if you expect a response, give us a response to
Basic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of just basic being an adult. If you think this case is worth X, go show me the case is worth X. I mean,
Do you find yourself settling cases pre-lit really at all, or at your level they're going to have to get filed at some?
at my level, they're going to have to get filed just because you're talking big dollars often, and there's often, oftentimes a serious liability issue somewhere on some side, whether it be a third party, a contrib, or whatnot, and just in the complicated medical and stuff, it's hard to do without the adversarial process, right?
I agree with you. I got in an argument with somebody last week, and they were like, "No, you could settle a $10 million case pre-suit," and I was like, "Let me know where you find those, because I'd love one."
You can settle a $100 million damage claim for $10 million pre-suit.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get the point. Like, there's a bunch of little cases that you don't need to file. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that no adjuster is going to feel comfortable without the advice of a good lawyer settling. And then maybe you represent a couple of astronauts that you're going to, right? Like, the case is worth $20 million per person, and there's no question about it, and you don't need a lawyer because you have some catastrophic death case. But the vast majority of stuff, right, like, we file it just because I know I'm never going to reach a level of adjuster who's going to stroke me a check for $500,000 or $1 million. So I got to get you guys involved.
Right.
Because frankly, I'd rather deal with you guys than an adjuster.
Oh, sure.
And they're going to feel more comfortable too, getting y'all's input on the stuff that I send them.
Well, and also, I mean, I feel like there's also the personal relationships, right? Like, if a claims handler calls me and says, "Hey, what's the deal with this guy Kyle Herbert?" Right? I can give them advice and insight. And
the greatest
interactions.
laser collection of maybe anybody on the Dirty Verdict.
Good looking, yeah,
Tall.
and yeah, that you don't necessarily get from just a
Random connection with an adjuster.
exactly. And but again, like you said, and like Peter said, you can settle a $100 million case for $10 million pre-suit, but anything big, you need that adversarial process. You need to point out.
You need some rules in place.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not agree more. Chris, I hope you're listening.
Chaz, thanks so much for coming on. I'd like to be honest, we do our best to get as many people as we can on the show that are from different backgrounds, because the problem with plaintiffs lawyers is you kind of start hearing the same stuff over and over. And we've tried real hard to get some defense lawyers on, and we're just flattered you decided to come on our show, and I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I like Peter said, it was good to get a balance. I was happy to provide a little insight into the defense world.
So
It's good. I appreciate you being like real straightforward and real frank about stuff, but walking a line on not too frank.
So which of your carriers pay the most?
Pass.
Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit our website at www.dirtyverdict.com. If you are interested in coming on as a guest or have a story idea, please email us at story@dirtyverdict.com.